Mr. Opera 2.0. What do I mean when I say a vocal coordination? That's an interesting word, and I think a really important one, because people tend to talk about the way they sing and confuse it with what they are and who they are. Talking about a vocal coordination helps you remember that the way you sound is the result of choices you make, and it's the result of position, motion, and attitude. And a coordination is when you put all three together. So you coordinate these different elements and you get a certain result. When you're learning how to sing, you're going to get a lot of messages from people that will tell you about what you are, what kind of voice you are. In classical music, we tend to call this Fach. A Fach is an interesting word because if I have a chest of drawers and I store things inside those drawers, like socks, for instance, and I want them all inside their own place so that I don't confuse which one is which. The word for that is Fächer, and that's the plural form of this same word, Fach. So really, when you're talking about what is my Fach, you're talking about what's the hole I fit into? What's the box I can be put into so that I have some kind of identity? I'm going to suggest that you maybe put this idea aside when it comes to your vocal training and just think about, what am I doing? What result am I getting because of the choices that I'm making? Because even if your nature is X, Y, or Z, you can't do anything about it. Now, people will tell you you need to know so that you make the right decisions. But when it comes to the real world, you're not making these decisions. Someone else is making them for you. You don't have to worry about your type. What you need to worry about is the choices you make and how they're going to affect your outcomes. So today we're going to talk about one of these coordinations. In the earlier lessons, I introduced you to the concept of tracks, and I introduced you to the concept of position, motion, and attitude. And today it's going to be really good to have those concepts because we're going to work with them a little bit more. The one track that's probably the best for you to learn, other than G track, which I guarantee you're already using it, is S track. Let's look for S track together, because although I showed these to you in the first lessons that I did, if you've been experimenting with them, you may start to get a little bit frustrated about not being able to do them. When I introduced you to the three tracks, I talked a lot about the tongue. And yeah, it's true that the tracks themselves are defined by movement of the tongue, but you can't make them happen just by using your tongue. So how are we going to do this? Let's start thinking about the neck. And it all is going to come down to something called the styloid process. So let's get inside this styloid process and see how it works. And maybe this will help you understand why you can't just expect your tongue to do all the work here. Now this little spiny thing we got here, that's the styloid process, and you can see it's got three muscles attached here at the base. Now I'm going to refer to them just singular, but keep in mind that all of these muscles work in pairs. You have a styloid process on each side, and so when I'm talking about what one of these muscles does, it's only half the picture because it works as a team with another identical muscle on the other side. The first muscle to look at is the styloglossus. And the styloglossus, that's this guy right here, that's how your tongue gets pulled back into the region where the nodes are going to start for track S. That's the styloid track because the tongue gets pulled towards the styloid process. Just to refresh your memory, unless your tongue is quite flat and spread out, these muscles are going to have a hard time pulling your tongue back to where we're trying to get it to go. They're very thin, and compared to other muscles of the tongue, like the hyoglossus, for instance, or the palatoglossus. This is the palatoglossus. Pretty cool, pretty cool. We can't see this guy from the side. So when you're looking at the diagram of the tongue I showed you before, remember, this guy's not included, and it's really, really strong. That's a really weak muscle compared to the others. It can do a lot for you, but you're gonna have to help it out. Let's take a look at the next muscle that attaches to the styloid process. Let's work our way actually to the back, to the stylopharyngeus. Now this muscle is interesting because it attaches to the pharynx. Everyone keeps talking about opening, and one of its jobs is to help dilate the pharynx. In other words, to make it nice and open. That isn't something that evolved for singing. It actually did evolve for when you've bitten off more than you can chew and you need to swallow it. Then you need to dilate your pharynx. The next muscle that's really important is the stylohyoideus. This guy right here attaches to the hyoid bone. Unlike your tongue, you can't wiggle your styloid process. So what you're left with is moving the whole neck. When you're trying to establish position and motion, move the big thing first. And we started actually with the smallest things at the beginning of this series, and we're moving into progressively larger and larger pieces of the body. Now the styloid process, you might be thinking, well, that's really small, isn't it? How are we moving the biggest thing if we're talking about the styloid process? Well, it can't wiggle. It can't move. So when we're talking about the position and motion of the styloid process, we're actually talking about moving the whole neck. How does this apply to finding track S, the styloid track? We want to position the styloid process so that when the styloglossus muscles pull, they actually pull towards a place we want the tongue to go. If we have our neck like this, when the styloglossus pulls, the tongue isn't going back here. Back here is where we want the tongue to go. But in order for it to get there, we have to move a bigger piece, the whole neck. You could also think in terms of the space your tongue is going to occupy. Just to review, S track and L track use what I call pocket vowels. You may have heard some singing teachers or some singers refer to really, really shallow, thin vowels, either in the back or in the front of the mouth. And you may have heard some coaches or teachers or singers talk about opening from the top.
My name is Mr. Sticky Dick in my Bows, and we are going to learn Canadian.
So just like the Canadians from South Park move their whole upper head instead of moving their lower jaw, when you're looking for S track, you can think about moving your whole neck in order to move your head.
Once again, what your argument is all about?
This is not about diplomacy. This is about dignity. This is about respect. This is about realizing that humor is... You guys are dicks!
So a really great way to test this out is to go back to position, motion, and attitude. And for now, we're going to think about attitude. So the attitude that we're going to go for is a breathy sound, or a very veiled sound.
I know you want me, so don't keep saying our hands are tied.
And we're going to just do it in G track because that's the most instinctive. So we can start from here. And while holding this sound, anchor your neck into the position you're going to look for S track. And stack up your whole neck and maintain this attitude of breathiness. So in order to do that, there's a kind of laziness in the throat. you're not really trying hard to close the chords and make a clear sound. You're just kind of, okay. So if you make this breathy sound, you've got the attitude of breathiness. If you maintain this attitude and anchor your neck, a really interesting change will happen. And what's really interesting here, other than the way my voice completely changes into something much more projected, much clearer, and very, very, very extroverted. And you can see my whole posture has changed in order to get here. What's interesting is that I didn't change the attitude in my throat. All I changed was the position and motion of my neck, and it completely changed the sound. So I went from this to this without really thinking about anything other than the position of my neck. This is a really simple exercise, and I'm hoping that by doing it, you may find that you've been in S-track before, and the only problem is you can't get there consistently, and you may or may not have trouble making vowels there. Now, if you're having trouble making vowels in S-track, go back to the overtone scale from earlier lessons. Because if I'm in S-track, I have to learn how to change overtones in order for people to think I've made new vowels. You may remember a channel called This Is Opera that was quite a popular channel while it was around, and they would often show side-by-side comparisons of different singers using different coordinations. And they would make the case that in the old days, everyone used different coordinations from today, except the big problem was they missed the obvious differences between the coordinations that they were showing. And often they would show different coordinations from 1950 or something like that and call them the same thing just because they're from the same period in time, and also because the recordings would sound a little bit similar. But if you take a careful look at these videos, especially when you had a retired singer coming out to sing for some kind of special event or masterclass, and they would be demonstrating side by side next to a quote-unquote modern singer. We can hear that the coordinations are completely different. Unfortunately, they tended to miss the really obvious differences. And the biggest one of those was posture. I'm going to be making more content about how you can get your body to help you get into S-track. Because although I talked about the neck today, and that's a bigger piece of the puzzle than just the tongue, your neck alone can't do it if your pelvis and your spine and your hips and your legs especially aren't cooperating. So for now, maybe try this in a chair. A stool is probably better. Or if you ride a horse, try it while riding a horse. The important thing is get some support under your butt so you can take your pelvis kind of a little bit out of the equation. It won't be completely out, but it will be easier to manage. And work on the position of your neck. Some things you want to look for when you're going into S-track and missing is that you'll see a little tuck of the chin just as you start. Just before you start to sing, you'll see something like this. And you may have seen baritones kind of in this position a lot. And I call this simulated S-track, or S-like G-track, or we could say styloidized G-track. It's very common with baritones because baritones and basses do tend to sound the best in G-track. Of all the singers that use G-track, baritones and basses really sound great because it's close to speech. So if you are a baritone or a bass, you may think about not hating on anyone who uses G-track, because you do too. We can also see examples of singers and teachers using different body positions to get into specific coordinations they're looking for, and we can often see them mistakenly passing off their G-track coordinations as S-track coordinations. This is Lisette Oropeza, and she is a fantastic soprano. We can see that her posture is upright, her ribs are stacked, and her neck is in a position to access S-track. And she uses this to get quite high in her range without getting a strained or unclear sound. Now if we look at Capucine Chiaudano, we can see that she's leaning forward and tucking her chin. Now she does this to get some S-track-like behavior out of her voice, but it's just not the real thing.
This is too much. You see?
Yeah.
Did you hear it?
Yeah.
Be really careful about this position, because if you expect to sing opera, you're going to have to keep your face in the lights. So track S is going to have two really important benefits. One is going to be access to higher notes and lower notes, and it's also going to give you what they call squillo or ping or ring. But also it's going to make you actually visible to your audience. When you have lights shining down on you from above, as is the case most of the time in the theater, and you tuck your chin and angle your face downwards, it makes the audience lose sight of all your facial expressions. Your face becomes just a mass of shadows. Equally bad would be having the light coming to your face from underneath, because that's going to make you look like you're telling ghost stories around the campfire. So that's all for today. You may have noticed things are looking a whole lot different around here. I've got special effects, and my face looks different, and probably my voice sounds different to you. And that's thanks to the generous support of viewers like you. You can click on the link in my video description for ways that you can support this channel. The number one way is to subscribe and ring the bell. Now the other major way that you can support this channel is by directly donating. I don't have a Patreon, and I'm hoping not to have to do anything with exclusive content for people. I'd like to just be able to give everything away for free, but to do that, I have to depend on support from donors. So if you find this content useful, you're using it with your students, you're using it for yourself, or you just enjoy the content that I'm making and you want to help me make it better, your generosity is really the way to show it. So thanks, and I will see you next time on The New School Singer and Mr. Opera 2.0.